Hi, I'm Robert Bryant with Bryant Premier Woodworking. If you like the content in this video, please make sure you like us and subscribe. Today we're going to take a deep dive in how we got this concept and how we completed the build. First off, my wife loves doing puzzles, and she constantly has a table up in the living room that is annoying to walk around. So we wanted to come up with a concept that we could have a coffee table along with a puzzle table all in one, and I think we succeeded in doing that. We thought of ideas of just making the top fold over like you've seen on some other projects online, I'm sure, but we tried to come up with something truly unique where we could try to have more table space by sliding the wings out to store the puzzle pieces and yet be able to cover up the puzzle when guests come over to not have it on display. We worked our design around the rest of our furniture, which is cherry, and we kind of have the panelized look on the ends of a lot of our other furniture along with the turned legs. So we kept that concept in the build, and we went from there and constructed the overall coffee table box. The secondary top is constructed of maple, and that sits in a dado groove. So we had to construct the side panels first and then glue the whole thing together to incorporate that top in that dadoed slot. Next, we started turning the legs. We modeled the design after the rest of our furniture, and we turned each one of those on the lathe, as you can see. Then we turned to the top for the table. We wanted to come up with a kind of a very unique design for this, and being I've started doing a lot of resin tables, we decided to do a hexagon pattern for this, and then my wife's favorite color is blue, so then we mixed in some blue with that and put some swirls in it to kind of create a very unique top that'll stand out. In creating this hexagon top, I learned quite a bit. We found out that taking a little hot melt and gluing these blocks in place actually creates a little bit too much adhesion. Even though we use mold release, just make sure you're using just a little dab if you're going to go the hot melt route. Otherwise, creating a clamping down method to keep the blocks from floating up when you pour the resin would be recommended. We just came up with a unique pattern and threw the hexagons in there. They were all cut out on the table saw on a jig I had made, not shown in this video. The mold is made out of melamine plywood, something we had laying around, and we just used latex caulk and shot it together. And I would not recommend using silicone caulk. It adheres too much. You'll have issues trying to strip this off. You will see later in my video that I did have issues stripping this off, mainly because of the hot melt that we had used to adhere the blocks down to keep them from floating up. And then you'll also notice that I should have put more support underneath the melamine plywood. We got a little warping, and you can see this when I went to surface it. We then poured the epoxy in 2 lifts. The epoxy I used would not allow me to pour over 1 inch. Make sure you're reading the directions on the epoxy you get. There is a big difference between deep pour and not, and then each manufacturer is very specific on what conditions need to be. After removing the top from the mold, the next thing would be to surface it. We placed the tabletop in the router sled, and we set the table so that way it was plumb and parallel to the bridge that runs over the table to make sure we got an even surface. As discussed earlier, our tabletop mold had some warp to it, and you can see this when we went to go surface it, that the center of it started planing off sooner than the edges. And then you can also see I had a lot of material to remove from the mold that was stuck on it. Once the top was a uniform thickness, the next thing was to surface it with the sander. I worked up through the grits to 400 grit and routed the edges, and then hand sanded the edges to 600, and then came back one more time and hit it to 400. And I cut the top into 2 pieces for each sliding half. And then after the halves were ready to install the drawer guides, and basically I secured those with an angle that was epoxied and screwed into the top, and then put a skirting around the angle and the drawer guides to cover those up. Different portions of this project had to be finished at different times. We used Odie's oil for finishing this project and buffed that to the sheen we desired. Overall, the project was a success. There was a number of hurdles to overcome, especially with the skirting around the drawer guides to cover that up, and for the tops to be mated at the same height. I have a happy wife. I no longer have a table in the living room, so big success there. I'd like to hear comments from you guys to see what you think could be done differently or better. and just any other comments or questions that you guys may have. As mentioned earlier, if you like the content in this video, please like it and then subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.